Hello everyone, it is Drake, and this will be a very short video. This is mainly just to direct your attention to a global canon list that we put together in my Discord. The link to the list will be in the description of this video. It'll direct you to the Patreon channel of this channel, and it'll be free to view there. And I'm just going to give a brief description of how we put it together, and then that's pretty much it. Yeah, so this list, we started working on it 6 months ago or so. We've been working on it for a while. The main goal of this was to get a list together that a new reader could easily access and could direct them to readily accessible, relatively cheap copies of great works of world literature. Now, there were some obvious constraints to this that we had to work around. So we had to first think about, are we going to go all the way up to the present? We're obviously going to start with the oldest stuff, but how recent are we going to go? Because the more recent you get, the more arguable the choices become. And we decided we would end with Goethe because, partially for like funny reasons, but also for real reasons. So Goethe obviously was a big proponent of world literature. By his time, Europeans were already getting translations of all sorts of literature, so he has this idea of world literature, Weltliteratur. So that's part of the reason. But also, right around Goethe's time, you have the French Revolution, and then you get just like a massive explosion of nationalism everywhere. So everyone has a national poet, everyone has, a national literary tradition that the government funds translations of and tries to pump up, and people all have their national novel writer or whatever. And that would blow up the list also because we wouldn't want to shorthand anyone, but also that would double the size of the list, I think. And we were trying to keep the list manageable. That was one of the limitations, that we wanted to keep the list affordable for the average person and that the average person's library could sustain. So I think we have it around 500 titles, and a handful of which are only available public domain, so you'd have to get them printed out. So, give or take 500. So that was one of the limitations that, people could have argued whatever, but we cut it off at Goethe. So that's that. So this is all classics. Again, like I said, a couple of the other limitations, we wanted the copies to be readily accessible. So we tried it all, if at all possible. We didn't want to pick things that only Brill published. We didn't want to pick things that are out of print or are exceptionally rare, this kind of thing. We either picked things by Oxford World Classics, Penguin, university presses that generally have paperbacks, or we picked older copies that have digitized public domain editions. So that was one of the other limitations. In a handful of copies, for abridged editions of really important works, like the Rig Veda is one that comes to mind, we gave a readily accessible selection. And then in a bullet point just beneath it, we gave how you can get the full copy. But the full copy is inevitably going to be way more expensive and harder to find. So, but each one of those anthologies or, abridgments of larger works, we tried to give an idea of what's in the anthology, if it was important stuff, or we tried to give an unabridged edition of that. So that was one of the other major decisions we had to make. How did we compile the list? So it was chiefly myself and Walt. I will link his channel in the description. Myself, I just used my knowledge that I've been working on. So I've been collecting literary histories of the major literary languages of the world. So that would be Greek, Latin, including up to the Middle Ages, Sanskrit. I just know English and anything from 1500 to the present in Europe. I know Chinese. I have a literary history. And I'll be working more on Arabic and Persian coming soon. So that was my contribution. And then Walt also just knew stuff, and he included that. But then we also had a script that compiled information from bibliographies, academic bibliographies. And we hand-picked through every single title to make sure it was a real book, to make sure it was accessible, to make sure the publisher was real, to make sure it was a trustworthy translator. So unfortunately, that limited us on certain traditions. Certain traditions were shorthanded because English doesn't have very good translations, or the translations are all really old and we can't vet them. So that was one of the limitations. Kind of a corollary to that, one of the limitations was, okay, how are we going to split this up? For my own personal list, I did strict chronology of the author's date of birth. Okay, now there are some texts that there's no single author, we don't know the author's date of birth, whatever, that's relatively easy to ballpark. For this list, it was chronological and geographical. So you'll see when you look at the list, but that was just the most reasonable way. So if you're thinking, okay, I want to find a Heian period Japanese author, what are the best editions, or what are the most accessible / best editions? Oh, here's the list has it. So that's our basic rundown there. All right, that's really all I wanted to say. I wanted to keep the video short, and I also want to offer, if you notice any things that you perceive as errors in the video, if you would like to help contribute with the list, if you have any suggestions on editions that are more easily accessible and are more scholarly defensible, please suggest them. The Discord is the easiest way to do that, but if you just want to leave a really, fleshed out, thoughtful comment on Patreon, I can easily manage that. Yeah, in the end, this list is just supposed to be helpful for new readers or people who don't read the classics very much and want to expand their interest. I myself found some books through working through this list that I've since read or I've since gotten a hold of, and it's already broadened my reading. So I hope it does the same to you. All right, that's all. The list will be linked. Death is a Gang Boss.